Hello, my name is Andrew Oakley, and I'm going to be talking to you today about self-driving cars. Firstly, I'd like to identify what exactly a self-driving car is. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration defines a self-driving car as a vehicle in which operation occurs without direct driver input to control the steering, acceleration, and braking, and are designed so that the driver is not expected to constantly monitor the roadway while operating in self-driving mode. As some of you may know, large companies such as Google, Uber, Audi, all have been researching self-driving cars. While the theoretical benefits of self-driving cars are immense, such as more free time, less traffic, there is an ongoing dispute about the true safety and the ability to integrate self-driving cars into society. My main claim for you today is that self-driving cars are currently incapable of being integrated into the world today. I'm going to be supporting this claim with crash statistics from both self-driving and human drivers. And secondly, I will be supporting it with the lack of flexibility of self-driving cars. Thirdly, I will be talking to you about the lack of liability laws pertaining to self-driving cars. My first supporting claim. Self-driving cars have a higher involvement rate in accidents than human drivers. This came from a study from the University of Michigan's Transportation Research Institute. It stated that self-driving cars were part of accidents twice as often as human drivers. Now, this doesn't mean that they are the cause of the accidents, this means that they are involved in more accidents, twice as many. And this is because human drivers are interacting with them in ways that the self-driving car isn't breaking the law, but the human driver is taking advantage of the self-driving car, which results in more crashes. Now, although this isn't the fault of the self-driving car, no consumer would purchase a car which increases the likelihood of a crash. So this kind of defeats the safety aspect of self-driving cars. My second supporting claim. Self-driving cars are not flexible enough to take on the US roadways that vary in the United States. According to Andrew Chatham, a leader at Google's self-driving car mapping team, rather than having to figure out what the world looks like and what it means from scratch every time we turn on the software, we tell the computer what the world is expected to look like when it's empty. The job of the software is to figure out how the world is different from expectation. This makes the problem a lot simpler. This system, however, becomes more complicated when you take into effect the true size and variation of the US roadways. The Federal Highway Administration states that there are 4.12 million miles of roadway in the US. Google, who is the leader of self-driving cars who have been in the game longest of anybody with autonomous cars, has only mapped 2,000 of the 4.12 million miles of road in the US. This discrepancy means that self-driving cars would be not effective on the roadways that they have not mapped, or they would be incapable of even traveling on the roads because they can't see lines on the road or lane markings. This brings me to my third and final supporting claim. There is a lack of laws pertaining to the responsibility of damages that occur in self-driving car accidents. According to the New York Times, on May 7, 2016, Joshua Brown, an owner of a Tesla Model S autonomous car, was killed when his Tesla failed to recognize an oncoming semi-truck. A law firm specializing in product defects is representing this family in an investigation over the liability of this accident. Kip Viscusi, a Vanderbilt law professor, stated that Tesla is potentially vulnerable due to consumers being reasonably enough might expect that autopilot feature works better than it did in the case of Joshua Brown. The increased liability and lack of laws pertaining to autonomous cars means that there is a disconnect between the manufacturers and the systems of law currently in place. This disconnect, if you increase the amount of self-driving cars, would result in potentially higher liability for companies who are producing self-driving cars. And what this means is that there would be a smaller incentive for car manufacturers to produce self-driving cars if they face increased litigation pertaining to self-driving cars. So today, I have talked to you about the comparison of crash rates between human drivers and self-driving cars. I've talked to you about the lack of flexibility of self-driving cars on the US roadways. And lastly, I've talked to you about the absence of appropriate legislature pertaining to the liability of self-driving car accidents. These points have all been made towards my main claim that self-driving cars are incompatible with the institutions and roadways of the present. Thank you.
All right, Andrew, the topic ID was good. Your definitions are fine. You identify the claim very clearly, or the main proposition. In the preview, you basically identify the supporting points, but they're only by terms. They're not really by claims. In the body of the speech, though, you do phrase them as claims, and I appreciated that. I thought that that was a good thing to do at that particular point. Probably should do it in the preview as well. There's an explanation of each of the points as you were going through that process, and the explanations are okay. I think we could use a few more examples on that first point. On the second point, on flexibility, you had an interesting piece of factual data concerning how much mapping has been done by Google. And I think there needs to be, there may be a definitional question going on here, because if you're talking about mapping, I'm assuming that that's for the autonomous cars to be able to function on, as opposed to Google Maps, which I'm sure covers a heck of a lot more territory. And it probably needs to be explained why mapping of the roads is necessary in this format in order for the autonomous cars to drive on them. The closest that you come to that is basically that the cars can't read the lanes and the lines on the road, that sort of thing. And so there's got to be some kind of technology, I don't know, GPS thing that they can read that will tell them where they are in the lane, and that sort of thing. So I think there need to be a little bit more explanation on that. On the liability issue, I think that you have a good example here. There's a discussion about what some of the possibilities are. I do think you could use a little bit more expert testimony on that particular point, but you had some interesting information there. And the idea that Tesla could be financially responsible, and that's going to discourage other people from following through, I think is reasonable. In essence, the first point seems to suggest that other cars have to be off the road for these cars to work. And I think it's not going to be hard for you to show that it's unlikely we're going to get rid of all these other cars rapidly enough for us to be using these autonomous cars or self-driving cars instead. I think you're missing some possible arguments there. Let's face it, everybody's got an investment in the car that they currently have, and you're saying, oh, not that anymore, you got to have something different. Well, if you just, in the last 4 years, if you bought a new car, they're telling you got to get something different, that's a problem. You spent $20,000 or $30,000. I tell you, I hold them on my cars for freaking ever. All right, thank you.